Hello, listeners, and welcome to a special episode of Cognitive Dissidents. As usual, I'm your host. I'm Jacob Shapiro. I'm a partner and the director of geopolitical analysis at Cognitive Investments. Joining me for this episode is Dr. Jacek Bartosiak, who is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Strategy and Future. He is one of the foremost experts of geopolitics in Poland, and we really appreciate him making the time to come onto the podcast and talk. We were supposed to talk last week, but I had a family emergency that I had to take care of. He was willing to come on today, and we're going to post this as soon as we possibly can. We're not going to waste any time. That means that this will probably come out before the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States. So if you are in the United States, you can enjoy this over the Thanksgiving holiday, in part because we won't have our normal weekly episode with me and Rob, and we'll have a little bit of a hiatus before we get back on track with the podcast cadence. So enjoy the special episode. Last but not least, Jacek brought up a concept towards the beginning of the podcast, which is also in the title of the podcast, called the Intermarium. And he talks a little bit about it, but I just want to give you some color for what that means. The Intermarium was a post-World War geopolitical plan that was conceived of by a Polish leader to try and unite the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth lands within a single government. Intermarium means between the seas, and it's basically an idea for some kind of alliance or even a multinational entity that would unite the Baltic, the Black, and the Adriatic seas. So if you go back and look at history, sort of pre-1800s, pre-1700s, when Poland led one of the largest countries in Europe. It actually was one of the largest countries in Europe at the time. Poland bordered the Ottoman Empire in the south, fought wars with the Ottoman Empire. It really was a power that transcended these seas areas. So when Jacek talks about the Intermarium, that's what he's talking about. And I found his perspectives on this. They obviously cut against my optimism about the European Union. In some ways, the things that Jacek talked about would be a direct challenge to the future of the European Union, but it was a fantastically important concept that was in the podcast. And even though I disagree with Jacek on some of the particulars, I found his perspective incredibly eye-opening, especially from somebody who was there on the ground in Poland, for whom this war hits a lot closer to home than probably for most of our listeners. So with that intro out of the way, I'll say enjoy. Thanks again to Jacek for coming on. Listeners, if you haven't rated or reviewed the podcast, please consider doing so. It takes a couple seconds, hugely helpful for us. You can write to me at jacob@cognitive.investments if you have comments about this podcast or want to talk about what we do at CI. So cheers. If you're celebrating Thanksgiving, enjoy. If not, we'll pick up back with you in about a week and a half. So cheers. See you out there. Cognitive Investments LLC is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Cognitive and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. For additional information, please visit our website at www.cognitive.investments. The information provided is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, and it should not be relied on as such. It should not be considered a solicitation to buy or an offer to sell a security. It does not take into account any investor's particular investment objectives, strategies, tax status, or investment horizon. You should consult your attorney or tax advisor. Jacek, thank you so much for making time at midnight in Poland to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
That's okay. Thank you for hosting me. That's always a pleasure. I really appreciate it on my side.
Well, I have to ask, so you said there was warfare happening in your own house today. So is everything recovered from the hostilities of the Battle of the Hairbrush in the Bartosiak household, or are we still
exactly
refugees?
Yeah, that was a major event between my three daughters fighting for the hairbrush. Yeah. And that was really, highly intense atrocity. And yeah.
Was any one of them more strategic? Did you see yourself in any one of the three, or were they all pretty strategic? How did it go?
No, but the fight was in diverse domains. It was both kinetic and, narrative campaign and libels and and also using the proxies or patrons by trying to drag me into this fight, and different strategies were involved, and they were quickly cascading quickly into major escalation. So really.
Well, our thoughts are with you here in the United States. We want all actors to not exacerbate the situation and work together to make sure that violence doesn't continue.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it.
Jacek, there's a lot to talk about. Why don't we just start out with what happened last week? Because that was when I reached out to you. It sort of, the rhetoric was, oh my God, is this World War III? Did Russia just bomb Poland? Is this, or are we getting NATO involved? Is it all that Article 5, all that stuff was sort of at play. And then it turns out it wasn't a Russian strike that hit the Polish town. So tell me a little bit, maybe walk me through what your experience was of when that news hit and how serious things got in Poland from your perspective.
It looked quite serious, and actually, I don't know what in reality what happened. Actually, we don't know whether these were Russian rockets, missiles, or Ukrainian, and this is of lesser importance. I'm sad to say it, or maybe I'm not sad. Maybe I'm happy to say it, but this is of lesser importance. Because of much greater importance is the narrative, the story that was being told, because the story is shaping the strategic decision. And here, the major strategic decision was made, apparently, that corresponded with the interests of NATO, United States, and Poland to downplay the significance of this development or this event or this tragic occurrence, because 2 people died and there was a major destruction in a small village quite close to the Ukrainian border. So whatever happened, it was downplayed by the Polish government cooperating with the U.S. government. What was astonishing was Biden was the first to react. I think he was in Bali, quite far away from Poland, when he was discussing the situation in the forgotten village in Polish eastern frontier, and that was a smart decision, in my personal opinion, because the interest of NATO and the United States was not to be dragged into a general war with Russia, or at least at this time. Okay, and to downplay it, whatever happened, to downplay the significance of that. Of course, the interests of Poland and the United States are not 100% aligned in that respect, because we want to win this war. We want the Russians to be defeated, not only convincingly, but entirely, even up to the moment of collapse or disintegration of the Russian statehood. Ukrainians want the same, and we would like to use the Americans to do it. Yeah. The Americans want the Ukrainians to win this war, to score a convincing victory, but maybe not to the extent to collapse Russia, and of course without the US involvement. So, and Poland, would like to win this war, but without our involvement. Do you understand? So, and the Ukrainians also were playing this rocket, missile incident extensively because they wanted to drag us into this war and help them, even if not with direct involvement, so maybe more with the some sort of increased sale of increased deliveries of weapons, or maybe even escalatory actions like providing them with manned aircraft or very long range fires, or HIMARS, operational range fires, whatever, right? Something that would not only augment but also increase their capabilities, and that would be a good excuse. And to last but not least, whatever happened, I think for Poland, this is a perfect, how to say that, occurrence but behind the scenes, not openly, to push hard the Americans for more reassurance and for more guarantees, for more weaponry to protect our borders, so that we are not dragged into this war and and as a result also NATO into this fight. And that might be done only if the deterrence stands, and the deterrence, real deterrence, is provided by the United States and its capabilities that should be present in Eastern Poland. So I hope that our government is wise enough to really push hard against the Americans now, behind the open channel, behind not in the open, that the Americans are providing more assurances.
Well, there seems to be a little bit of a disjuncture there, though, because if it's in Ukraine and Poland's interest to win the war and defining that victory as collapse of the Russian state, I mean, the Ukrainians well, I guess I should phrase it this way. Can the Ukrainians do that by themselves? Is it realistic to see that Ukraine can win this war in that sort of way?
I think they are capable of defeating the Russian land force, entire land force, which is not big. And of course, but that would of course require a lot of hard work, a lot of resilience, a lot of capabilities, and the staying power of the Ukrainian state, and a lot of money to keep them in the fight. And of course, deliveries of weapons. Mm-hmm. They have enough manpower and the will and the resolve to do it. And the Russian army is small, and it's already was wasted. So I think it's doable. The problem is of a wider scene, because Russians have geostrategic leverages, like energy, like long-range fires, like strike and reconnaissance complex that can decimate the Ukrainian energy sector, and they are doing it. And also, food supplies, energy supplies, all those wider instruments of power, not the fighting force on land that is, just doing stuff. And this is a critically important thing. And here, the real enemy, the real target, the real center of gravity, using the Clausewitz notion, are the continental powers of Europe, basically. And they resolve to keep helping and hold on, to bear with the consequences, and especially Germany. And here I have the doubts. And also, the center of gravity in the pure warfighting capabilities is the United States political establishment. Mm-hmm. How much it wants to invest in defeating Russia, because in some corners of the American strategic establishment, there are already voices saying that it's been enough. The Russians are having their Tsushima defeat. We can't collapse Russia, and it's escalatory. It's scary. It can bring us to the edge of the general war. Let's avoid this scenario. And if let's assume that this missile that was fired was really Russian, and we downplayed it, but it was Russian. So by showing that there might be a horizontal escalation that including Poland, the Russians are sending a signal across the Atlantic Ocean to the American strategic establishment. Hey, listen up, guys. We can escalate horizontally, okay? And you do what then with your guarantees? So you'd better make sure that there is no escalation by ending this damn war now. Since, you have won it a bit, but still we are alive. So we'd better conclude now. Because otherwise, you never know what's going to happen, and you don't want to have a general war. So basically, this is kind of a signal. If if we were to assume that this was a Russian missile,
Well, since the last time I spoke to you, we also had the Nord Stream 2 explosion. And there was some speculation here in the U.S. that Poland had done that, or that the U.S. and Poland had worked together to do that, to make sure that the European Union and the continental powers that you referred to sort of stayed on the side of Ukraine in the Russia-Ukraine war. How would you characterize the Nord Stream 2 sabotage? Was that also Russia sort of communicating this kind of message that it could escalate, or what is your view there?
Jacob, I don't know. And on that particular topic, I wouldn't like to speculate, because this has been a very sensitive issue around, and a lot of people will watch our will listen to our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a highly national security interest thing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And the Russians also were using some comments of Polish politicians that that might suggest who did it to the detriment of the Polish national interests. Okay, in this
Yep.
whole game. And I would like to. This is of course, a critically important occurrence that is maybe killing any German-Russian cooperation on energy. So this is a game changer. And at this moment, I wouldn't like to speculate because the ball is in the game, and I want Poland to win this damn war.
Yeah. Here in the United States, you're right that before the midterm elections, there was some waffling from some parts of the U.S. Political establishment about support for Ukraine. It seems to me, though, that most of those voices didn't do very well in the election. So I wonder if there's a reprieve there. But you were very, very pessimistic the last time we spoke about Germany and about the rest of continental Europe. You seem to still be pessimistic about them supporting the Ukrainian cause. Have your views changed at all? Do you feel like the last
No.
few months have confirmed your suspicions? Where are you at with the Germans in particular?
I think that war revealed that the Germans were cheating the transatlantic community, because they were building their power within EU and Europe based on the access to energy from Russia and the prospects of cooperation with China, and using the cheap labor from the neighboring Central Eastern Europeans. And I think that was their modus operandi, their way of life. And I hope it will be destroyed in the process of this war. And what I see is the mutiny of the peripheria in the European Union, both in the south because of the economic pressure exerted by the Germans, and this, by the structure of the German economy, and here in Central Eastern Europe because of the Intermarium is resurrected after 250 years. The victories of the Ukrainian army in the east at Kiev and Kherson and Izium, Kupchansk, resurrected the Intermarium. And I may tell you, it doesn't. This concept does not exist in the mental maps of the Western Europeans. It's all about Russia and Germany and France. While for more than half of a millennium, there was a distinct geopolitical construct here in this part of the world called Intermarium, or the old Commonwealth of Poland, Lithuania, and others. And the Ukrainians now being at war, comes the advisors to the Zelensky strategic circles are advocating for resurrection of the this balancing coalition, anti-Russian balancing coalition of the Intermarium countries with two anchors, Poland and Ukraine. And I think that and Ukrainians are quite determined to push for that, because they claim, and they are right, that whatever NATO does, it will have to adjust, because security architecture is gone and we have the war. To save us from war, to end it, and then to keep us safe and prevent war, we need to create the proper security architecture anchored in the proper balancing act that would deter Russia from behaving like that. And given the current, and that's the answer to your German question, and given the current positions of the countries in Europe, NATO doesn't provide that because Ukraine is winning and it's not part of NATO. So NATO either adjusts or dies. This is what the Ukrainians are claiming. Adjust by embracing Ukraine, basically. Or we will have regional concepts, and that would keep Russia off limits of Europe by stabilizing the deterrence. And that would be Poland and Ukraine together with Baltic states, Belarus, if the pro-Russian guys are gone, and maybe Romania. And that would receive help from the United States. This concept is hostile to Germany and France and their power in Europe. They would do everything to kill it. And this is why their structural interests were promoting the Russian interest. And this is a widespread perception in Poland and in the region. There is no return to business as usual and to status quo ante from before the war, regardless how much money the Germans have. The EU will be broken if they push for that. I mean, Poland will never accept this anymore.
That sounds to me like you just sketched out a scenario for the collapse of the European Union. Do you think that is sort of the likely scenario here?
If the Germans don't adjust and do not follow the American-led transatlantic order with full subordination, they will break European Union. Yes.
What do you think Ukraine needs to see from Germany? Like, what are the specific things that would tell you that Germany is making that pivot or versus is falling short?
First of all, the Germans would have to promise the accession of Ukraine into European Union and to NATO, not block it. Then the Germans would have to really abandon the energy-driven economy based on the Russian energy, and for good, not just temporarily. And they would need to show that it costs them money, that it breaks their social contract, and they will stomach it because of the strategic reasons. They are not showing this resolve now. They are not showing this resolve at all. As a European, I'll tell you, they are showing something quite opposite. They want to reconsolidate their power in EU based on what's going on. Chancellor Scholz not only went to Beijing, and it was being monitored probably closely by you and the American counterparts, he did it against the advice of the US government in a blunt challenge to the US opinion of how the world should operate. Then he publicly stated a few things about globalization that is not in the interest of the United States. Then his ministers are criticizing the United States for many legal acts that are being right now processed through Congress that support the American economy, reshoring, and also decoupling from China.
Mm-hmm.
And in Europe, Chancellor Scholz had the nerve to go to Prague in Czech Republic and make a speech that, guys, of course Hitler was a very bad thing, in the past, and the German power was, it was not a good idea, to consolidate the continent and German power. But because the times are very exceptional now, someone has to take charge, and someone has to be in charge, and the Germans are perfect to be in charge. The Germans have this inclination to really not understand the reality and surroundings, and had this, lack of tact. And that's what they did again. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I'm not. It's not. You've known me for years. I'm not anti-German at all. For many years, I was an advocate of a major cooperation with Germany. Mm-hmm. And right prior to the war, I also thought that for Poland, that would be the greatest option to cooperate with Germany and had a lesser presence of the United States, but still some presence, nuclear presence, and strategic competition, but with Germany. And the war changed my opinion. It revealed the structural bond between Russia and Germany that was killing my region.
Do you have any hope then? Do you put any hope in France as either a moderating influence or someone that might be able to also participate here, or are they just sort of apathetic to the situation?
I think in the current geostrategic setting of the entire Eurasia, there are too many conflicting interests in Europe. Look, if China is a challenge number one to the United States, and its challenge is stemming from trade and technology, basically aspect, yeah. So the United States needs both France and Germany to be on its side, okay? And on the other hand, both Germany and France are not interested in being on American side without incentives. And the Americans cannot propose any incentives to them, while the Chinese can. And that means that the United States strategic presence is sort of not welcome in Germany and France, actually, anymore. It's very much welcome in the Intermarium countries that want to have leverage against Russia and have some leverage against Germany, but not in Germany and France in the current geostrategic setting. This is why those countries were favoring the cooperation with Russia and the continental consolidation, although on the lip service level they wanted to have a value-based order, and that's I think it's a geostrategic equation that will decide the future of the United States presence in Europe. And I haven't heard any strategic argument how the Americans are going to handle it to win. I haven't heard a structured strategic argument how the Americans are going to prevail. Because the military conflict in Ukraine is, of course, very important and very tragic. But the structure of things happening is much more profound. And it's not the 40s or the 50s when the Americans won the war, were by far the largest industrial power with supply chains control and capital control, and also Marshall Plan and energy control, and basically it could propose a lot of things. It could threaten a lot of things to Western Germany, to France, and I don't see how the United States can do this today with the structure of its economy that is quite different from the 50s of the 20th century. I don't know. And even if we win this war in Ukraine, it may all end up with the Germans rebuilding both Ukraine and Russia, and attempting to subordinate Poland and surroundings, and push for even more profound cooperation with China. That might be the end result of this war if the Americans do not put their skin in the game, which is broader than only supplying weapons to Ukraine. Because the nature of the rivalry with China is different. Yeah, and you need to prevail in the key domain. So that's my opinion. And unless the United States are showing incentives in new technologies, new industries, new energy that really pushes the Intermarium forward or the Europeans forward. And I don't see the willingness and capabilities in the United States to do it. Yeah.
Well, you might have already answered my next question, but it seems to me that the Achilles heel of the Intermarium countries you're talking about is the economy, because
of course,
all of these countries are part of the German supply chain. It doesn't really work without Germany. Right. So how does, I guess you need something like the United States to come in and provide. Yes. I mean, that's...
or a major effort and a lot of luck. That's why, this is why the Intermarium may win the war, but it will not win the peace. And that's a major issue. That's why I said that we could end up with Germans rebuilding everything anyway, right?
Well, yes, although I feel like Poland has a front row seat for rebuilding. I see that Polish companies are trying to be first in line for rebuilding Ukraine, no? I mean, you guys have the cultural connections, you're hosting the refugees, you have the political relationships, you have the same sort of strategic mindset. I would think that Polish companies would be at the front.
And we are similar to each other, yeah. And we understand when we talk, mostly we understand each other when we talk. So yeah, apparently so. But we don't control supply chains, and we do not initiate capital investment, at scale, which is required. So yeah, so basically we are an empty shell. Yeah.
A country that we have not mentioned yet, and which probably needs to be mentioned in the context of the Intermarium. We've thrown a lot of shade at Germany here and France and the European Union, but none of them have been quite as pragmatic as Turkey has been in relationship to Russia. Now, there's maybe been some change on that recently. I mean, Erdogan pretty well embarrassed Putin, I think, over the grain deal. There's this stuff about, are they going to start looking at oil tankers coming in and out of the Black Sea? What is your position on Turkey? Do you think Poland has a position on Turkey? Is that a potential ally? Is it a rival? Is it part of the problem, part of the solution?
No, it doesn't have a position on Turkey in as much as it should. But the general opinion is that Turkey is a critically important potential ally in containing China, because the arch enemy of Turkey is not China, Russia. The arch enemy of Turkey is Russia. However, and all those frequent meetings between Erdogan and Putin are just the Bismarckian game of I kill you and I negotiate at the same time. And those guys are really good at it. It's not like this. Take all or nothing. It's just all those. Welcome to Eurasia. This is the story. I kill you today. Tomorrow I talk. It's all about tug of war. And but I have no doubt that the arch enemy of Turkey is Russia, and they are fighting for influence in different parts. And Turks, and I know it from my own experience talking to the Turkish officials here in Warsaw, that they've been watching why Poland is not waking up, because the war is coming. As I heard once from one of them, listen, guys, the U.S. is ebbing away from Eurasia, and you are staying put. And Jacob, for those who do not know history, our listeners, Poland has had borders with the Turkish Empire for a few hundred years, and we have had multiple wars with them, and they respected us always. Once we were the Commonwealth, we were defeating them, they were defeating us. It was really but we had common enemy. It was Russia, and the Turks were watching and telling me, guys, why are you not standing up to the occasion? Because the U.S. is ebbing away. Why don't you modernize your army? Why don't you really take on Russians as we do? So I wonder how they think now. So personally, I think that they are a very useful ally who is playing its own game in its own neighborhood. Poland doesn't have influence in the Black Sea to the extent so that we could have a competing interest or any fields of cooperation apart from a general feeling that Russia has to be contained. Okay, and of course, I think Poles are less reluctant to this Middle Eastern or Bismarckian, daily routine of killing and negotiating at the same time. I think we are more black and white. Whether it's good or bad, it's not for me to decide. And this is how we view the Turks. And of course, this is why we would like the Turks to remain a staunch NATO ally. And we don't like, all those, teaching lessons from the Westerners against Turkey, because we think it weakens NATO. Yeah.
I take your point about Poland not having interest necessarily in the Black Sea, but two of the countries that would be in your Intermarium, Romania and Ukraine, absolutely have. Excuse me.
Of course,
absolutely have interest there.
And if that happens, of course, if the Intermarium were to happen, the Turks would be a bit, I think, not unnerved, but not upset, but a little bit annoyed or nervous. Yeah, understandably. The life is one balancing game, so it's always like that. So I understand what you're implying, but at this moment, of course, there is no such feeling or resentment. Yeah, we will see. I wish we had this Intermarium concept, but as you rightly stated, it's an empty shell, and that means that Polish society is not convinced whether it wants to pursue the Intermarium concept for two reasons. First of all, it's an empty shell, and half of the Polish society is divided into two groups: independent zealots that were growing up also with this feeling of a lost empire in the East and stuff, and it's huge in the Polish literature, and half that wanted to modernize with Germans and fly to Rome and have an easy life, spending vacations on Bali. Okay, and this half, which is modern, simply wants to live as we have lived before the war. We don't want to have all those projects, Intermarium and stuff, and we don't have our own money, supply chains. Guys, are you crazy? And this is sort of this feeling. And let's follow this EU and enjoy this sort of chance, while the other part would like to push forward. But there is also another dimension that is very risky. As opposed to being a member of NATO, in which we were simply the net importer of security, and alliance look great. Yeah, great. They help us. We don't need to do anything. They just help us against Russia. In a real alliance with Ukraine, that means risks that we may be dragged into this damn war on the Dnieper River in order to stabilize security architecture, to create the proper balancing proportions. And this concept is too vague for the population to understand. Okay? And for the last 30 years, we were in a strategic slumber. Then we were 50 years under Soviet rule. Then we have only 20 years of independence, and then 100 years of partitions. I think the strategic culture of Poland is not mature enough to really digest this thing. Okay, at strategy and future, which I represent, I would like us to be that mature, and we talk about it. I 2 hours ago, I finished writing a piece about military alliance with Ukraine. And on Friday, I had a direct conversation with Alexei Arestovich, the famous guy from the corridors of power in Kiev, that not only predicted the war, but also is daily commenting on the conduct of war and geostrategic and geopolitical circumstances. And a few days ago, he proposed the Intermarium, and he claims that it's a living concept in Ukraine. And he talked to me about it, what Poland needs to deliver, military alliance, even the political union and economic union with Poland. And I'm telling you, there are places and people in Poland that like hearing that. So, and to hear that from those people fighting on the front for their survival means that they really know how to calculate the balancing factor, right, in all this thing. It's less theoretical, it's a real thing. But I'm not sure if Poland is Poland. Speaking of that, Ukrainians are claiming that NATO will have to adjust to the new reality, or it will be obsolete. Because they said that the key of victory, they changed the security architecture themselves. And they cannot be omitted now. Because it's all about making sure that war doesn't happen. You create alliances, you create such structures to stabilize the strategic rivalry and to deter war. If NATO didn't deter war in, on the European peninsula, and it didn't, if the United States didn't, and there was a major deterrence failure, so it's the Ukrainians that are changing the outcome of war, and they need to receive help from others to create a balancing coalition. And they don't believe in Germany or France or all those guys. Yeah, so NATO is like old toy, and this is what public officials are saying in Ukraine these days, over the last 2 months at least. And I don't know what's gonna happen basically with Poland, but for guys like me doing strategic thinking at Strategy and Future, I just went to my library, found a few books from all times of the old Commonwealth, our strategic thinkers, commanders in the field that were writing military strategies in the 17th century, the 16th century. I undusted them and started reading. And this is the direct outcome of what's going on in the East. And we're back in the game. At least at Strategy and Future, we're back in the old game.
Well, and to your point, I mean, one of the things I was going to ask you was if you felt like Poland was on the cusp of sort of a new golden age. I mean, that might be an overwrought thing to say, but when Russia is weak and when Germany is weak, and say what you will about Germany, I don't think they're particularly strong right now. Those should be sort of good times for Poland. The other part of this is one of the biggest problems for Poland has been the demographic situation. You guys have had one of the lowest fertility rates in Europe. Everybody's been leaving to go work in the UK or this, that, and the other place that they can make money. And send it home. But now you have something like, I mean, the figures range all over the place, but it looks like 4 million, 5 million Ukrainian refugees. The UN survey say that the majority of them are young, educated women with children. I mean, you've got this huge sort of demographic boost in the arm, and it's all Ukrainians who are probably going to be who are going to have firsthand experience of all the reasons the things that you're talking about are important. I would imagine that could change the character of the Polish electorate if those young Ukrainian women and children start voting and thinking about Poland in these terms. Am I being too optimistic, or do you think there is some kind of change that could happen there?
I share your opinion. Plus, I'll give you a few more comments. First of all, a lot of Poles are coming back from England and elsewhere. Okay, Polish economy has been booming for the last years. Unemployment is not existing, and basically, the life balance is great in Poland. I mean, life is really good in Poland. I think, and I know Europe very well. It's better than in most of the Western countries that I know. If you combine many factors, just proximity, life balance, how much you work, how much you might make money, everything, health, style of life, social life, family life. It's a good place to live here. I mean, this is a good place to live. And I'm saying it with full responsibility. And so people also are coming back from abroad. Not to the extent we would wish, because there are almost 20 million Poles living abroad. We are the fourth largest immigration recorded, after Chinese, German, and someone else. I don't remember. But what has happened over since the war started, but also prior to that, is the influx of Ukrainians. It's massive. Jacek, I don't know. Officially it's 4 million, I should say. I think it's more. Basically, I hear half of the times I can hear Russian and Ukrainian languages on the street, here, there, wherever I go. I'll give you an example. Last weekend, I was recording my programs in the almost westernmost sea resort on the Baltic Sea, quite close to the German border, very far away from Warsaw and even further from Ukraine border. The county was, prior to the war, 18 thousand people, and now there are 4,000 Ukrainians living there. Can you imagine? And it's
Yeah.
it's not a big town. It's a big city. It's as far from Ukraine as you get. It's in the middle of nowhere on the sea in the winter, which is, I mean, the Dead Sea. You know, I mean, if you haven't been to the Baltic Sea in November, it's the last. You know, it's not California, and in Warsaw, and I really like it. And they work. They open up businesses. They are very active. A lot of young folks. I really like it. I think it's a new vibe. It's a great energy, and they are just like us. Yeah, also. So I know it sounds weird, but it's really, they are just like us, and they speak Polish with a heavy Eastern accent, like our Eastern frontier guys from for the war. It's sort of cool a bit, and there are many factors that I like. They really work. I think our economy would go past without them working now. It's booming. I mean, it was booming, and maybe it will be halted this year, but it was booming, and without them, and also there was a wave of Belarusians that were escaping the Lukashenko's regime. A lot of young people. So maybe it would help our demography. But many factors would help. Return of the great immigration, 20 million people, if we had this program. Many things will help. The example of Ukraine is devastating. According to what I know, at the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine had more than 50 million inhabitants. Now, realistically, they have like 32 million or something like that.
Yeah.
30, can you imagine? That's a slide down the slope because of many factors, including the war. I mean, it was one of the most innovative Soviet republics with the most modern machine park of industrial park. I think their GDP at the end of the Soviet Union was the second largest per capita in the Soviet Union, but maybe I'm wrong. And what happened to them? Yeah, what happened to them? The brains they had, they were at the edge of the Soviet industrial thinking and scientific thinking. They were they were in the outer space. Those guys, they were having intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
Nuclear plants. Yeah, many of them. It's all the Ukrainians were doing it in the Soviet Union. So
would Poland ever pursue nuclear weapons?
Of course, it's if the I think if the Russians use the nuclear strike on Ukraine, I think there will be a major proliferation in many corners of the world, including in Poland, starting with Japan, South Korea, Turkey, Germany, Ukraine, and Poland.
Yeah. Jacek, before I let you go, I know it's late. I just wanted to ask a sort of a broader strategic question from your perspective, which is I was arguing with a friend of mine the other day. I think the world has moved multipolar. I don't think there's one dominant power, even two dominant powers. I think we've got, Turkey, Poland, Japan, Brazil. You look all around, there's all these different powers that are asserting themselves. He came back at me and said, no, it's just the U.S. and China, and everybody else is going to have to pick sides at the party. How do you see how the global sort of strategic balance of power looks like through the end of the decade? Is it multipolar? Is it bipolar? Is it unipolar again in favor of the United States or China or someone else? What do you see from your position?
It would be much easier to answer this question in 3 years' time. So let me be ambiguous a bit. let's assume that it's in 3 years' time, and the Chinese have not collapsed, and the Chinese keep behaving as they have been now. Okay, so let's extrapolate today's situation to 3 years' time. So I would be confident that the world would navigate towards the dualism, the rivalry between the United States and China, with those two poles, dragging the small particles around their economic spheres. And that would also culminate in the kinetic war. So that would be my answer. But anyway, I think we have just entered with the war in Ukraine into the new Napoleonic era of chaos, lack of the international order, and many wars of different dimensions: trade war, blockades, technological wars. This was exactly what it looked like since the French Revolution up to the Congress of Vienna. And I think we're entering a very similar period of time, of course, with this modern thing, new domains, space, cyber, technology, chips, and stuff. But basically, it would be of similar thing. And there is hope that existence of thermonuclear weaponry is creating a sort of a containing effort by the parties to really contain competition with some civilized norms on the escalation ladder. So we don't go up to the maximum of the escalation ladder right away, because we will be coercing the other party by using different ranks on the escalation ladder, threatening or using, but without resorting to the last, to the best thing we have, being thermonuclear weaponry. And that's hope. I call it a scalable war. I think that there is a world war that is scalable, that has started already. And the question is when it started. The second year of the Trump administration with an attempt to kill Huawei, or with the start of war in Ukraine in February 2022. Oh, you never know. You're an American. So when did the Second World War start?
Well, it started when Germany invaded Poland.
You think so?
Well, that would be the American. That's how they teach it in American history books.
Okay, of course they teach the same in the Polish schools, but in China, I think they teach about the invasion of Manchuria. In Soviet Union, they taught about the Barbarossa. In Russia, I think they also teach in this way. I think also that maybe for more savvy readers of history, there would be a discussion whether the war started with the Munich Conference, or Sudetenland thing, or partition of Czechoslovakia, right? Or not, you don't know, basically, because what is the war, basically?
Yeah,
Kinetic war?
those were all links in the chain. I think things like Munich and Czechoslovakia; those were all points at which the war could have been stopped. I don't know if the war started then, but if the UK and France, to bring it back, had put their foots down, Hitler couldn't have continued on. It was sort of that's why appeasement has become a dirty word in the United States, because there was this opportunity to stop this thing before it did, and now that metaphor gets used, everywhere.
I know, but at the same time there was a Spitfire, race. I
Yep.
mean, the British were buying time because they unleashed military production prior to Munich, and they wanted to, to make proper investments on time, and that saved them in the Battle of England. And I wonder whether this has started already as well this time around. That the war starts when both parties understand that there is a lack of trust and the threat of the future, and I need to get ready for that. And because we have thermonuclear weaponry today, it's more of technology and trade. How would you call the Chip Act against China? I mean, it's a decapitating move.
The Chip Act is more serious than anything the Trump administration did towards China. I mean,
Exactly.
it's 100% economic war.
How would you compare it to the Roosevelt's tariffs on, and bans, sanctions against Imperial Japan on steel, iron ore, oil,
It's not quite there. It's not quite there. I mean, because China can still make lower end chips or get access to some chips. So, and the United States has issued exemptions for a lot of these companies too, because a lot of these companies, even American companies, are exposed in China itself. So there's still some ambiguity there. Whereas the Japanese, when Roosevelt said no more oil for Japan, I think they had 8 months, 12 months of reserves, and that was it. Like the economy was going to go dark in 8 months.
Yeah, but the difference was mostly about geography. They were an island, while China is a continental power with access to energy, to many partners. It's in the middle of the globalized chain. But in terms of the nature of this instrument, it's quite similar. That's my opinion. And very powerful given the importance of the semiconductors today.
It's very powerful. I agree with you that it's very powerful. It is not quite oil, but it's it's a provocation. The thing about China is that China's always been a continental power throughout its history. The most depressing analytical fact that I talk about these days is that for the first time in Chinese history in the last 20, 30 years, they have to import energy from abroad. They have to import food from abroad. They can no longer get what they need out of the continent itself. So they are, whether it's semiconductor technology or food and protein or oil. You probably saw China sign that massive deal with Qatar today, 27 years of LNG supplies. Like they need to be able to secure those supply chains, and they never had to do that in their history. And the only example we have of an Asian power doing that at the scale of power they're reaching is Japan, which is a depressing thought.
Yeah. So so that would be my answer. And I think there are more sanctions in the air, like on AI and in the Congress, on all those elements that are important for AI, for the quantum computing and communication, right?
Yeah. Well, Jacek, I hope you won't wait another 3 years to come on, even though that's how long it's going to take to figure out the multipolarity conversation. But I appreciate you very much. I hope that there are not too many refugees from your household in the second battle of the hairbrush. And we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Cognitive Dissidents podcast, brought to you by Cognitive Investments. If you are interested in learning more about cognitive investments, you can check us out online at cognitive.investments. That's cognitive.investments. You can also write to me directly if you want at jacob@cognitive.investments. Cheers, and we'll see you out there. The views expressed in this commentary are subject to change based on market and other conditions. This podcast may contain certain statements that may be deemed forward-looking statements. Please note that any such statements are not guarantees of any future performance, and actual results or developments may differ materially from those projected. Any projections, market outlooks, or estimates are based upon certain assumptions and should not be construed as indicative of actual events that will occur.